After being in business for 130 plus years and counting, it's fair to say Nintendo has gotten more right in their history than not. But when they do miss, they miss on often historic levels. These big mistakes haven't sunk the company, but these are still stories from Nintendo that we would imagine the company would like to forget or ignore. If you want to see us do this same kind of video for PlayStation, let us know down below, where you can also find a link to our Xbox mistakes video and a chance to win some free goodies. Right, time for 20 minutes on Devil's Third. Number 1. Letting franchises like F-Zero rot. Crack out the soundboard nice and early for this one. There's been no F-Zero in 20 years. Animal Crossing or Metroid fans may complain about having to wait so long between releases, but at least fans of those games get new releases. Fans of F-Zero, for example, were forced to wait 20 years for the release of a new game between the 2004 release of F-Zero Climax for the Game Boy Advance and now. And the release of the Battle Royale style F-Zero 99 for Switch in 2023 really doesn't and shouldn't count. It's just F-Zero, but someone put a Chaos mod on it. That simply boggles the mind, considering how beloved this series continues to be. It's not just us that likes it, we swear. And F-Zero barely scratches the surface of characters and companies that Nintendo has chosen to mothball for who knows how long. Kid Icarus hasn't had a game in 12 years, and before that, fans had waited nearly 20 years between Nintendo releasing Of Myths and Monsters in 1991 and Uprising in 2012. Elsewhere, Star Fox had its last major game with Star Fox Zero for the Wii U in 2016, and well, yeah, we kinda understand why that's been the most recent one really. There's something to be said for oversaturation, of course, and we wouldn't want Nintendo to publish sequels they don't believe in, but it gets a bit silly sometimes. Punch-Out hasn't had a new release since the Wii entry in 2009 either. Are we ever going to get a fourth Mother game? How about those Ice Climbers, who we're going to have to rename Puddle Climbers by the time they thaw out catching? Devil's Third 2, the third inning, the list goes on and on. Meanwhile, it seems as though Nintendo is physically incapable of going more than 2 to 3 months at the minute without a re-release of a Mario game, which, yeah, we get it, but let's get a bit more from you. Speaking of the best video game mascot since, Bonk? Do we have any bonkers in the chat? Let us know. Number 2, the 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie. Oh gosh. Well, not without its fans, who are also often without their medication.
Are you on drugs or alcohol?
No, sir.
Do you take drugs or alcohol?
What is drugs?
And who have enjoyed a pretty good comic book sequel and a recent physical media box set to rival that of the Criterion Collection. The 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie was a brutal failure for everyone involved. Without getting into whether or not the movie is actually good, which it probably isn't, but your mileage may vary, let's focus on how this infamous box office bomb was received. With a fair amount of hype behind its release, Nintendo's first time at bat with loaning out one of their beloved franchises for a major live-action Hollywood blockbuster, Super Mario Bros. Came to theaters on Memorial Day weekend 1993. It was met with reviews so withering it all but damned the entire genre of video game adaptations for a great many critics and audiences who maybe didn't care about Mario, his brother, and whoever the hell Dennis Hopper is supposed to be. A lot of Mario fans loathed the film. It didn't even make back its budget, grossing less than half of its reported budget domestically, and we have no idea how the movie performed overseas. Our guess is not great. Again, the movie has its admirers, but keep in mind that the reception to Super Mario Bros. Was so profoundly bad, Nintendo didn't even make another Mario movie for 30 years. Bob Hopkins deserved better. Rest in peace, King. Number 3, hating crossovers. Nintendo being very close to the chest with their IP is probably due to the last entry, and yeah, it's fair enough, but let's stop denying people the chance to play as Waluigi in Devil May Cry, okay? Nintendo clearly doesn't really want their characters in any games but their own, unless it's on their own console, of course. Mario did appear in the GameCube version of SSX on Tour, what an absolute whipper by the way, while Nintendo outfits were available in the Wii U version of Tekken Tag 2, but for other consoles, forget about it.
Forget about it.
While that's their prerogative, of course, fans of Fortnite and other games that draw from a variety of IPs have been clamouring for Mario to show up in their favourites for years, so why isn't it happening? Well, in the case of Fortnite at least, we can guess. In a recent social media post, a former Nintendo public relations manager named Kit Ellis said it makes no sense for Nintendo's brand. They spent decades building up these characters, he elaborated. They can just be one of a dozen other characters that all play the same, put into a game that's all about shooting people and is so against their brand? You're telling us you don't want to see Ganondorf hitting the Nene against Goku? What the hell, guys? It would almost definitely be commercially profitable to let Peach or Kirby show up in someone else's game. Teaming up Mario and the gang with the Rabbids gives us hope, which, didn't really work out that well, really, commercially though. And then there's Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer featuring The Legend of Zelda, very catchy title, guys, but Nintendo still remains extremely protective of their characters. There are exceptions to the rule, but not even Sonic creator Yuji Naka could convince Nintendo to let Mario hang out with the Blue Hedgehog for a crossover platformer, so don't hold your breath. Also, don't insider trade Yuji, you large lemon. Number 4, the Virtual Boy debacle. The Virtual Boy was released in mid-1995 and was gone in less than a full year. That's particularly depressing when you consider the system took approximately 4 years to develop. Despite its many imperfections and frustrations, namely that it could cause migraines if you played too long as you were basically gazing into Lawnmower Man's night terrors, the fact that every game was red and black like the worst Fiend matches, the fact that most of its games were unremarkable at best, the high price tag of nearly 180 bones and a plethora of other issues, the Virtual Boy started out with good intentions. It's just that those good intentions didn't mean anything in the end. While some historians now see the Virtual Boy as an intriguing failure with some genuine bright spots, the fact remains that the system was a complete disaster upon release. Nintendo saw the system sell less than 1 million units, a seriously bleak figure that would come up again when the Wii U performed abysmally years later. Don't worry, Atari Jaguar, your 6 Jagillion sales record is still safe. The technology behind the Virtual Boy was impressive enough, especially for the time, but Nintendo made some disastrous mistakes here. They may have been onto something here, but they made a dramatic misfire in how they brought this idea to life and did a bit of damage to the image of virtual reality in the process. Virtual Boy Wario Land was pretty sick though. Pretty much, yeah, decent, it was alright. Number 5, being too family friendly. This has been a point of contention for a long time. Nintendo is, after all, the company that once turned down The Binding of Isaac for a 3DS release. Nintendo has also had a murky history of censoring games that they feel cross the line. The Switch has seemingly brought Nintendo more in step with their competition, as you can play games loaded with gore and other types of controversial content pretty easily these days, but the perception remains that Nintendo is a company that emphasises being a family-friendly company over anything else. That's simply not true, at least in the current console generation, but it's a testament nevertheless to just how pervasive Nintendo's squeaky clean image has become. Even with games like Doom and The Witcher, some players still see Nintendo as a place for cuddly fun and not much else. It doesn't help this perception that the most popular Switch games aren't rated higher than a 7+. The company that infamously banned blood in the SNES port of the first Mortal Kombat isn't quite that fanatical anymore, but it's apparent to many that they still have a long ways to go to change the minds of those who don't see their systems as an essential destination for older players. What do you reckon? Do you reckon Nintendo should make more mature games themselves? Publish, I don't know, a Pokemon Battle Royale game where you have to beat Mr. Mime to death with hammers? I don't know, let us know down in the comments down below. Number 6, burning Sony. Few mistakes had deeper consequences than the time Nintendo actually betrayed Sony in the midst of a collaboration that would leave us in a very different world today if it had actually worked out. Would we ever have giant enemy crabs? It's simply not worth thinking about. So, what happened? In 1991, Sony and Nintendo had begun working together on what would have been a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. It was a move that made sense, given the clear indication that CDs were going to become increasingly relevant in game production, and Sony saw the huge potential in collaborating with their fellow Japanese giant. While the relationship sought to benefit everyone, with Nintendo getting a powerful add-on for the SNES, and Sony putting a more serious foot into the video game industry, Nintendo execs became convinced that Sony would simply take the technology and develop it for their own interests. There was some truth to this suspicion, as PS1 developer Ken Kutaragi has indicated in interviews, but the way Nintendo chose to handle this would have disastrous consequences. The day after Sony unveiled the Nintendo PlayStation add-on, Nintendo announced they were dumping Sony for a deal with Philips. Sonic Computer Entertainment was literally created out of spite in the wake of this duplicity, and we got 2 Sports Champions games as a result. Also a reduced market share for Nintendo and a rivalry that will persist for the next 25 years. Number 7, speaking of those crazy guys at Philips, fans of hubris, which is always a really fun word to say by the way, and Nintendo history will no doubt find it a little funny how Nintendo's new deal with Philips played out. Had the whole thing came together, Nintendo could have at least consoled themselves in the wake of Sony's vengeance with a successful venture with one of Sony's biggest competitors. However, the Philips console, a $700 paperweight known as the CDI, completely bombed. Selling for an absurd amount of money, the Philips CDI was never going to be taken seriously. The technology, to be fair, wasn't terrible, but the steep price tag and aggressively mediocre library ensured no one was ever going to buy this thing. I saw one on Facebook Marketplace not too long ago for like 150 quid, and I almost bought it, but I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with this thing. I mean, where's this going to go? Nintendo licensing out their characters for some of the worst Mario and Zelda games ever made didn't move the needle much either. It was a joint effort that benefited no one in the short or long term. Nintendo would soldier on through the 90s and back cartridges for the N64, which was probably a mistake maybe, while Philips got out of the console manufacturing business and officially abandoned the CDI in 1998, which is akin to giving someone CPR for 8 whole years even after they turned into the thing and bite your hands off. The CDI wasn't without potential, but it certainly seems like Philips didn't have the first clue of what they were even doing. You might have hoped working with Nintendo would have rubbed off on Philips a little, but no, not at all. Number 8, no DVD in the GameCube. While a lot of us love the GameCube and wouldn't categorize it as a failure, the console struggled to compete with Sony and Microsoft during the 6th console generation can be attributed to any number of things really. Some feel the library just wasn't strong or varied enough, which is nonsense because it's got Chibi Robo in it despite the GameCube having some of the best games of its time. Others consider that Nintendo's decision to go with smaller CDs, skipping DVD playback altogether, was the one crucial mistake that crushed the GameCube's hopes. It's hard to argue with that, to be honest. While the GameCube was a fascinating little system that showcased Nintendo's willingness to be innovative from a design standpoint, it didn't have the ability to play DVDs at a time when the medium was a massive part of an average consumer's life. How many times did you watch your Van Wilder DVD back in the day? Was it more than 500 like me? Let me know down below. Sony and Microsoft understood this and benefited greatly. Most of us knew at least one person who bought either of those consoles because they were the most cost-effective DVD player on the market for a little while there. Would DVD support have made the difference for Nintendo? It certainly wouldn't have hurt, you know. Nintendo was crushed by Sony and was narrowly outsold by the Xbox across the early 2000s. DVD playback might have made the console just a little more attractive to some and helped Chibi Robo to sell 6 squillion units like it deserved. Curiously though, Japan did get a GameCube that featured DVD playback by the name of the Panasonic Q, along with basically every other media playback of the dime. However, it only ever managed to sell 100,000 units or so, and it's kind of hard to find today at an affordable price while not needing some kind of repairs. Number 9, the Wii U marketing. Otherwise known as what marketing, the Wii U was seemingly in trouble from the moment it was announced, beginning with how it was marketed. The Wii U's release proved to be a defeat so brutal you had to wonder at the time if Nintendo could even come back from such a failure. It put Nintendo in the position of having to make sure the follow-up console, which of course was the Switch, was a monumental success. Otherwise, the Wii U might have become a good deal more infamous as the console that triggered Nintendo's complete downfall from the console market. Some people generally thought they were finished because of it. So what went wrong with the Wii U? In a word, everything. The launch library was a little underwhelming, and it pretty much was for the rest of the time. There wasn't much third-party support after it was initially promised. It was also just a little confusing for some, read clueless parents, as to whether or not the Wii U was a new Nintendo console, an add-on for the existing Wii, or some sort of mutant hybrid of those two possibilities. That confusion could have been addressed easily with a clever, well-timed and expansive advertising campaign. The Wii U would still have problems, a few of them rhyming with Smanimal Smossing Smeebo Smestival, but at least people would be aware it even existed, and had at least a few excellent games available and coming soon. Unfortunately though, the Wii U's marketing was sparse, cringy and confusing. It was hard to care after watching any of those ads, and the Robot Chicken and Regicide adverts, as good as they were, simply came too late. Number 10. Putting content creators in content jail. Nintendo has had a long, ugly relationship with people who want to play and stream their favourite Nintendo games. This has been particularly true when it comes to YouTubers, with Nintendo at one point starting a highly controversial creators program that saw streamers losing even more revenue than they already were in a pretty low-paying niche, basically disincentivizing free promotion and making the company look scared of the future of media. You know what? Maybe they were right though. Nintendo eventually shut down the program, but the damage to their reputation was already done. Taking a deeply antagonistic approach to dealing with people who play your games is something that's difficult to understand in 2024, and while Nintendo was obviously quite successful, it's not unreasonable to suggest that not taking advantage, but in like a fun way, not the Dr. Disrespect way, of their supporters and content creators is a mistake of the highest bloody order. It also doesn't help that Nintendo is still clashing with content creators, going after people for playing mods or any other numbers of sins Nintendo seemingly can't forgive. We're still waiting for them to bash our front door in for reminding the people that F-Zero deserves better, goddammit. Don't get us started on Nintendo's response to emulation, even if that emulation involves games that cannot be obtained through any reasonable legal channel. It's a frustrating pattern of behaviour against creators and players who by and large are just enthusiastic supporters. Nintendo has softened their stances a bit in recent years, but to say they still have a long way to go would be an understatement. Nintendo continues to make life very difficult sometimes for historians, streamers, content creators and players alike, and that's maybe their biggest mistake of all. And that was our video looking at some of the biggest Nintendo mistakes of all time. Here's a bonus mistake for you. Why are there no themes on the Switch? Well, big bit of spit then. They've had loads of years to implement a system, so you could go on My Nintendo or Nintendo Award or wherever it is and pay your Mario coins or however that works, and got yourself a nice Waluigi wallpaper, tasteful nude of Waluigi to put as your background. I don't know. What did you think we should put in here then? What have we missed? What have we got wrong? Let us know down below. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and thank you for watching.